Hello everyone, my name is Leslie Cantona. Today we are going to talk about the significant contributions to public health with Luther T. Terry. First of all, we're going to go through his timeline. He was a very accomplished man and he had a lot going on for himself. So here we go. Luther T. Terry was born in Red Level, Alabama on 1911 in the month of September. He was a man who accomplished a lot and was very involved in public health. He also taught a lot during most of his life. In 1931, Luther obtained his Bachelor's of Science in Birmingham Southern University in 1935 and his MD degree in Tulane University in 1935. 3 years later, he moved to Washington to intern in pathology at the Washington University. Between 1940 to 1942, he began teaching as an instructor at the University of Texas. In 1942, he then became the Public Health Services Chief of Medical Services. During the early 1950s, Terry began his cardiovascular research to prove to the people that smoking was the cause of many cardiovascular diseases. During that time, he became the Chief of General Medicine and Experimental Therapeutics at the National Health Institute. In 1953, the very first Heart Institute was opened, and Terry was appointed the first chairman of the medical board of the clinical center from 1953 to 1955. During that time, from 1944 to 1961, he became the assistant professor at Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine, in which he and his team began the golden era of cardiovascular clinical investigation. In 1958, he then became the assistant director of the National Heart Institute. I'd say he really loved what he did. After the cardiovascular clinical investigation research was over, Terry quit smoking in 1963 to show the public that clearly cigarette smoking is the cause of cancer and other cardiovascular diseases. Terry released his report to the Advisory Committee as the Surgeon General of the United States in 1964 regarding smoking and health, and later the Cigarette Labeling and Advertising Act was passed. Then in 1965, Terry was able to work with the agencies to help ban advertisements on radio and televisions, as well as smoking in workplace. In the late 71s, he became the vice president for medical affairs and then began lecturing as the professor at the University of Pennsylvania for 4 years. And in 1975 became the adjacent professor. In 1981, the year I was born, Terry retired his profession as a professor and was given the name Emeritus Professor, which means successful professor. However, he still continued his last few years as the corporate vice president for medical affairs for ARA Services of Philadelphia until 1983. Terry died at the age of 73 from heart failure in 1985. He was a very ambitious man who devoted his life to his work. He was married and he had 3 children of his own. So, political, we're going to go over a couple of things. The climate of time periods in terms of political. During Terry's era was at a peak due to tobacco and alcohol sales, which heightened tensions between countries from overseas trades. And after the Great Depression, which was in 1914, and during the World War II, tobacco companies offered jobs with poor wages to many underground crimes. During the time of Terry's research, President Kennedy appointed Terry the general surgeon, and he was given the opportunity to learn more on health and smoking and then offer that to the public. In terms of the social economic factors of Terry's era, poverty was a huge stressor during this time. Men looking for jobs to support families. Um, the mortality rate in men was about 70%. So the public was welcoming Terry's work and learning that the health problems that were caused from smoking. So, however, Hollywood actors depicting smoking in films was causing a controversy against Terry's report, which glamorized smoking as it showed the beauty of smoking, but it really didn't show the harmful effects of smoking. The environmental of Terry's era was a time of poaching, hunting, and destroying land to promote tobacco companies was more on rise than the work that Terry was trying to promote. Booming of harvest of tobacco fields overseeing made trading a high market investment. So people were and still about making money than on their health. Those type of people that rejected Terry, those are the type of people that rejected Terry's work. However, epidemiologists made a point that the air pollution, asbestos contamination, or radioactive materials was the epidemic cause of lung cancer, which was also a rejected part on Terry's work. Technical technology well, technological factors was used for many advertisements for many companies, and Terry was able to ban cigarette ads on television and as well as radio communications after the Communication Act was passed in 1971. Many tobacco companies rejected this act due to the amount of money that they lost from marketing their products to customers. Why did Terry believe in his work? Well, Terry established the Surgeon General Advisory Committee on Smoking and Health that concluded the epidemic rise in lung cancer and chronic bronchitis were related to cigarette smoking. He also believed and proved that smokers had a shorter lifespan than non-smokers and other health-related risk factors such as bronchitis or other cardiovascular diseases. Terry's adversities, well, there were three: politicians, farmers, and cigarette tobacco industries. North Carolina is known as the tobacco country. The politicians, farmers, and tobacco industries were not too happy regarding Terry's report regarding smoking causing lung cancer. In fact, they fought and asserted Terry and his scientists and all their statistics were mistaken in their conclusion. One of the farmers predicted that this story, as he called it, would be forgotten. A politician started or stated that the conclusion was made up. However, the federal government made a decision to declare war on smoking, on tobacco, and on crop, in which changed North Carolina's economy. Many farmers were forced to sell their land due to the decrease in economy. The results of his actions, well, President Kennedy hired Terry as the general surgeon as they worked closely on the report. And before Terry was able to publish the report, President Kennedy was assassinated. Um, However, there was no evidence that it could have been related to the report, but it was known that many underground crime families ran the tobacco industries. And so after the report was published, many farmers sold their crops due to the decrease in tobacco market. And in 1964, there were over 87,576 tobacco farmers. And in 2007, the number of farmers have decreased to 2,622. That's a huge difference. Tobacco companies had over 60,000 employees and nearly 250 million in annual wages. A lot of people lost their jobs after the report was published. State budgets also declined. Not only was North Carolina suffering from the decline of state budgets, but many other states suffered from the $2 billion the federal government brought in from tobacco taxes in 1963. Terry's overall contribution after the report was published was the reduction of the mortality rates, lung cancer, laryngeal cancer, and other heart disease related to smoking. However, there are still 42 million Americans who still smoke, and 8 million are living with a chronic illness caused by smoking. If you compare that to 50 years ago, that's an 18% decrease. Terry contributed to the cigarette advertising being banned in broadcasting and also smoking in the workplace. He was able to create health warning on cigarette packs regarding health risk. And besides the decline of tobacco industries, North Carolina was able to rebuild their economy by increasing in agriculture agricultures. Farmers started investing in livestock and hog production, in which had a dramatic rise at 2.5 million and still continues to climb. North Carolina also created a five-legged economy built around pharmaceuticals, technology, food processing, financial services, and vehicle parts. Okay, guys, so that pretty much concludes my presentation on Luther Terry. These are the references that I used for my research, and I hope you guys um, enjoyed listening to my presentation. And thank you all for taking the time to listen. Have a good night.